Welcome to HFY Vanguard, every story a battle cry for human pride. And this cry begins now. The roar of the crowd rolled like thunder through the stone corridors of Zaros Arena, echoing against walls that had stood for centuries. The very air vibrated with excitement, anticipation, and bloodlust. Torches blazed along the ancient pillars, mingling their smoke with the sharp tang of ionized metal from concealed security fields and the faint ozone scent of drones humming high above. This place was a paradox where barbarism and high technology coexisted, where traditions older than empires intertwined with the newest innovations of galactic engineering. To the masses crammed into its Colosseum tiers, it was entertainment. To those dragged in chains into the sand, it was death. Thorne ascended the narrow steps from the underbelly of the arena, his boots whispering across stone worn smooth by centuries of executioners, gladiators, and slaves. He kept to the shadows, his cloak hiding the outline of the blade strapped across his back. His eyes, hard as obsidian, scanned the platforms above where nobles and commoners alike pressed shoulder to shoulder. From the shadows, he studied them, jeweled aristocrats in silken robes, merchants with gold-threaded sashes, and off-worlders hungry for violence, all gathered in this amphitheater of cruelty. He had come not for spectacle, but for the whispers. He had heard rumors of a prisoner, unlike any other, a woman whose defiance had sparked the fury of Prince Corino himself. Whispers spoke of violet skin eyes sharp as blades, and a voice that had once carried weight in diplomatic halls. Now she was a slave to be broken publicly, an example to any who dared resist. A hush fell as the platform lights flared. From a high balcony, the amplified figure of Prince Corino appeared, his hologram towering over the sand. Tall, elegant, and draped in ceremonial armor, he radiated arrogance. His voice boomed, filling every corner of the arena. "Behold the fate of those who defy progress." Corino declared, his aristocratic features twisted with contempt. This Zen thought her status as a diplomat shielded her. She whispered sedition sowed rebellion among her kind. Today she learns the price of arrogance. Thorne's jaw clenched. He had heard of the Zen before, the enslaved species cursed by a gift they never asked for. Their touch could spark overwhelming pleasure in others, a biological quirk twisted into a tool of control. To the so-called civilized races, they were commodities, objects of indulgence or exploitation. Entire generations had been chained, their potential reduced to slavery. But as his gaze tracked the arena floor, his breath caught for the briefest moment. She stood tall in the blinding sunlight, even with shackles weighing down her wrists. Her skin shimmered like liquid amethyst, her chin raised in silent defiance. The chains clinked as she turned her head, scanning the roaring crowd with sharp, calculating eyes. Pride clung to her like a second skin, unbroken by humiliation. Her name, Thorne caught from murmurs, was Rena. The gates at the far end groaned. From the darkness emerged an earth lion, or rather what had once been a lion. Its ribs jutted through scarred hide muscles, fused with cybernetic pistons, its eyes glowing red with control implants. The creature paced in a circle, jaws dripping saliva mixed with machine oil. The crowd roared louder, intoxicated by the promise of blood. "Release her bonds," Corino commanded. "Let the Zen dance one final time." The shackles fell away, clattering against the sand. Rena moved with a grace that belied her circumstances. Her steps measured, her chin still raised. The lion lowered its head muscles, bunching for the kill. "Pathetic," sneered a nobleman near Thorne's vantage point. "An earth beast. The prince grows soft." The words sparked something inside Thorne. His hand brushed the hilt of the sword on his back, an anachronism in this age of plasma rifles and grav lances. Yet the blade was more than steel. It was a legacy, an oath forged in blood. The arena's ancient codes forbade energy weapons, demanded combat by steel claw and courage. Honor through combat, they called it. To Thorne, it was something else, a chance. He vaulted over the barrier. Gasps rippled through the audience as he landed in a crouch, sand scattering around him. Slowly, deliberately, he rose, positioning himself between Rena and the beast. His cloak fell aside, revealing the polished sword at his hip. He drew it with a hiss of steel against leather, the blade gleaming with deadly promise. With this sword, he said, his voice carrying over the stunned silence, I claim the prisoner, by right of combat. The arena froze, eyes widened, whispers spread like wildfire. The name rose among them, Thorne, the Alacrus slayer, Death's shadow, a warrior whose blade had felled 100 of the galaxy's most feared soldiers. Even Corino's hologram wavered with sudden recognition. The lion lunged. Thorne pivoted the sword, singing through the air in a flawless arc. The beast's momentum carried it past him, but its head did not follow. It thudded into the sand implants, sparking blood pooling as the body crashed to the ground. Silence reigned for a heartbeat before the crowd erupted in astonished shouts. Thorne turned to Renan. Up close, her beauty was striking, but what caught him was not the curve of her form, but the sharp intelligence in her gaze. She studied him as though he were a riddle, an equation to be solved. Why, she asked softly, her voice low, melodic, and edged with suspicion. Before he could answer, Corino's hologram flickered, rage radiating from every distorted pixel. You dare interrupt official justice? Who are you, primitive, to challenge me? I am Thorne, he replied, calm, unshaken. The name rippled through the arena like a storm wind. Even the prince could not hide the shadow of recognition, the warrior who had slaughtered Alacrus legions, who never fled a fight. The woman is mine now, Thorne stated flatly, unless you wish to dispute it personally, your highness. For a long moment, silence stretched taut. Then with a forced laugh, Corino relented. Very well, barbarian, take your prize. But remember, on Zaros, everything has a price. The hologram dissolved. The crowd erupted into divided shouts, disappointment at losing their blood sport, awe at the audacity of this warrior, delight at the new legend unfolding before their eyes. Thorne sheathed his blade, never breaking eye contact with Rena. She stood motionless, assessing him, her chains still clattering faintly. You're free to go, he said evenly. Her laugh held no mirth. Free in this galaxy. Look around you, hero. My kind knows no freedom. Then come with me, he countered, noting the way she tensed as he moved the sword back into its sheath. Unless you prefer to wait here for the prince's next amusement. From the edges of the arena, ceremonial guards approached, spears in hand, faces wary. Their leader bowed slightly. The victor's exit is this way, she said, gesturing to a shadowed archway. But be warned, the city outside is restless. Thorne nodded. He had seen it already, the shifting factions in the streets, the hungry eyes of gangs and rebels alike. Corino's public attempt to humiliate a former diplomat had stirred more than curiosity. He glanced back at Rena. Well, she studied him for a long moment, then inclined her head with graceful precision. Lead on mysterious champion. Though I wonder, do you always interrupt executions, or am I special? You talk too much for someone who nearly died, Thorne replied, striding toward the archway. And you're far too serious for a man who just upstaged a prince, she countered, falling into step beside him. The arena behind them still roared, the echo of their defiance reverberating through every tier. But beyond the torch-lit corridors, the real test awaited. For Rena, still calculating every move, and for Thorne, who had just made himself an enemy of the most powerful man on Zaros, this was only the beginning. And in the shadows above, a drone's unblinking eye followed them, transmitting everything to Corino's private chambers. The game had only just begun. The corridors beneath the arena were labyrinthine, carved from ancient stone and reinforced with steel graphs that hummed faintly with hidden circuitry. Thorne led the way with purposeful strides, his hand hovering close to his sword hilt, every sense tuned to the tension that thrummed through the air. Rena walked behind him, her bare feet whispering across the cold floor, chains dragging faint scratches into the stone with each step. Though outwardly poised, her mind spun with questions. Who was this man who had leapt into the sands to claim her? What drove him to defy a prince in his own domain? And most important, what price would she pay for accepting his intervention? They passed through a narrow archway, entering a torch-lit corridor. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering with every sway of the flames. Ahead, the guardswoman who had bowed to Thorne gestured them forward. This way, she said softly, her ceremonial armor clinking with each step. The victor's path will take you out unseen. Thorne inclined his head, though his eyes never left the dark passages ahead. He did not trust the ease of their exit, neither did Rena. She scanned each alcove, each shadow, calculating escape routes, memorizing details with a diplomat's mind sharpened by survival. The silence between them stretched. Finally, she broke it. "Do you always make enemies so casually?" Her voice was smooth, melodic, but underlined with a razor's edge of sarcasm. Thorne did not look back. "Enemies were given to me at birth. Making more doesn't change much." Rena's lips curved in a humorless smile. "How noble, or foolish? I haven't decided yet." Before he could respond, a clatter echoed from ahead. Shapes detached from the darkness, half a dozen figures, their weapons glinting in the torchlight. Some bore the insignia of the prince's guard. Others carried the tattoos of city gangs. Their blades were a mix of ancient steel and forbidden energy weapons, a breach of arena protocol that revealed their intent. Rena drew a sharp breath, but Thorne only exhaled slowly, loosening his shoulders as his hand closed around his sword. "Stay behind me," he murmured. Her chin lifted. "I'm not entirely helpless." The first attacker lunged. Thorne's blade sang through the air, intercepting the strike with a flash of sparks. He pivoted the counterstrike, precise, disarming the man and sending him sprawling. Another charged plasma dagger, crackling, but Thorne sidestepped his blade, slicing clean through the attacker's forearm. Rena pressed back against the wall, her pulse pounding. Instinct screamed at her to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Then one of the gang fighters lunged at her, his hand outstretched. Without thinking, she twisted her fingers, brushing against his exposed skin. The man froze mid-stride, a strangled cry escaping his throat before his body convulsed. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed in a heap, overwhelmed by the Zin's biological gift. Rena's breath hitched. The ability had always been a curse to her people, turned against them by slavers, perverted into chains. Yet in this moment, it had saved her life. Thorne dispatched the last of the fighters with a ruthless efficiency that left blood pooling across the stone. Silence descended, broken only by the drip of crimson onto the floor. He glanced back at Rena, noting the way her hand trembled slightly. "Impressive," he said. Her eyes flashed with bitterness. "Don't mistake it for pride. That gift is why my people wear chains." Thorne's expression remained unreadable as he wiped his blade clean. A weapon is only a curse when wielded by those who fear it. The guardswoman who had led them stood frozen, her face pale. She dropped her spear and fled into the shadows, unwilling to share their fate. Rena straightened, squaring her shoulders. "You killed them without hesitation? Does death mean nothing to you?" Thorne slid his blade back into its sheath. "Death is a language I was forced to learn young. I speak it fluently." They pressed on, through the tunnel's tension, a constant companion. When at last they emerged into the open air, the city of Zaros stretched before them. It was a city of contradictions, like the arena itself. Towering spires pierced the twilight sky, their surfaces gleaming with neon and glass. Hover vehicles zipped between them in intricate patterns, while at street level shadows ruled. Smoke rose from open markets where black market tech was traded as casually as bread. The smell of spices mingled with the stench of oil and refuse. Gang banners fluttered beside royal insignias, each district carved into territories by faction or family. Rena inhaled sharply. Freedom of a sort, but every step was watched, every shadow dangerous. She glanced at Thorne. His gaze swept the crowd with soldiers' precision assessing threats, noting escape routes. He moved like a predator among prey. They ducked into a narrow alley, its walls lined with flickering holoposters bearing Corino's face. "Order through purity." The slogan declared the prince's aristocratic features twisted into a sneer by the light. Rena tore her gaze away. "You still haven't answered my question," she said. Thorne arched a brow. "Which one? Why me? Why risk your life? Your reputation to save a Zin? To save me?" For a moment, silence stretched. Then he said, "Because I don't stand by while tyrants play games with lives." Her laugh was sharp, hollow. "You expect me to believe that every man I've ever met has wanted something from me. Power, pleasure, control. What do you want, Thorne?" He met her eyes, dark and unwavering. "Nothing." The word hung between them, heavy, almost unbelievable. Rena turned away unsettled. She had spent years navigating politics, surviving slavery, reading men like books. But this warrior refused to fit any pattern. They reached a small safe house hidden in the lower districts. Thorne pushed open the reinforced door, revealing a space bare of luxury, a single cot, a table scattered with maps and data slates, weapons hung neatly on the wall. He entered without ceremony, gesturing for her to follow. "This will do," he said. Rena stepped inside cautiously, her eyes flicking across the room. It was Spartan, functional, the lair of a man who lived by discipline rather than comfort. She sank into a chair, chains rattling faintly. "Who are you, really?" she asked. Thorne began stripping his armor, revealing scars crisscrossing his arms and chest. A man with too many enemies and too much blood on his hands. Her gaze lingered on the scars, each one a story untold. "The crowd called you the Alacris Slayer." He paused, his hand tightening on a strap. "They exaggerate." "Do they?" Her eyes narrowed. "I've heard of you. A warrior who never runs. A shadow that follows death. You're a legend, Thorne." He met her gaze, something dark flickering in his eyes. "Legends are built on graves. Remember that." For a moment, silence stretched. Rena leaned back, her chains clinking softly. She studied him as he cleaned his sword, the ritual motions precise, almost meditative. "You live for battle," she said quietly. "No," he corrected. "I live because battle is all that's left." Rena folded her arms, the diplomat resurfacing beneath the veneer of slave. "Then perhaps you saved me to give yourself a new war, a new cause. Is that it?" Thorne did not answer. His silence was answer enough. Outside, the city murmured with unrest. Factions moved like predators, scenting blood, waiting for Corino's next command. Inside the safe house, two broken souls studied each other across the gulf of silence, bound together by chance, or perhaps by something more inevitable. For the first time, Rena allowed herself to consider the possibility that this man might truly have no desire to own her. That perhaps impossibly he had saved her because he believed it was right. She was not ready to trust, but something in her chest stirred something dangerously close to hope. The safe house walls felt too close, the air too thick. Rena sat in silence at the rickety table, her violet fingers tracing the rim of an old steel cup, though she never raised it to her lips. Her eyes followed Thorne as he moved about the room with mechanical precision, cleaning his blade, checking ammunition, adjusting the reinforced seals on the door. Every motion spoke of habit, of a man who had spent a lifetime in places where one mistake meant death. She had known many soldiers, mercenaries, and killers, some arrogant, some broken, most predictable. But this man was different. He carried death like a cloak, not flaunting it, but never putting it down either. "You keep polishing that sword," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. "Do you think it will wash the blood away?" Thorne looked up, his eyes hard, but not angry. "It keeps me alive." Rena leaned back, crossing her arms. "So does betrayal. So does submission. My people learned that lesson the hard way." Her words hung in the air, sharp as glass. For the first time since they had entered the safe house, Thorne paused. He set the sword aside, its gleam catching the dim light of the lantern above. "You hate your gift," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. Rena's chin lifted. "Wouldn't you, to touch someone and feel their will collapse, to see them reduced to animals by biology? We were healers once. We could ease pain, mend suffering. Now we are nothing but commodities, our touch used against us." Her voice cracked despite her composure. "Do you know what it is to be sold as pleasure warrior? To be paraded as a tool of desire?" For a moment, Thorne said nothing. His silence was heavier than any words. Then slowly he drew his tunic aside, revealing a scar across his chest, jagged and brutal. "I know what it is to be stripped of choice," he said. "The Alacris came to my world when I was 10. They burned our homes, slaughtered my kin, dragged survivors into chains. I was too small to lift my father's sword, but I swore I would never run. I swore I would take from them what they took from me." Rena's breath caught. The Alacris, the warlords who had swept through system after system, leaving ashes in their wake. His reputation as the Alacris Slayer had always sounded like legend. Now she understood. It was born in fire and loss. She studied him, her voice softer, and revenge filled the void. Thorne's lips twitched, not quite a smile. It filled nothing, but it gave me a reason to keep breathing. For a long moment, the silence between them shifted. It was no longer sharp with suspicion, but weighted with recognition, two broken lives acknowledging each other. Rena rose from the chair, the chains at her wrists dragging faintly as she crossed the room. She moved with deliberate grace, every step as measured as a diplomat walking into a hostile negotiation. "You saved me," she said, her tone low-edged with something unspoken. "But was it for me or for the ghost of someone else?" Thorne's eyes darkened, his breath stilled. "What do you mean?" "I've seen the way you look at me," she pressed. "Like I remind you of someone." Who was she? For the first time, his stoic mask cracked. He turned away, pacing toward the window that overlooked the twilight city. The lights of Zaros flickered against his profile, casting him in harsh relief. "Her name was Lele," he said finally, his voice roughened by memory. "She was Zen, young, fierce. She believed the galaxy could be better. She believed I could be better. For a time, she made me believe it too." Rena's breath stilled. What happened to her? Thorne's hand tightened on the window frame. "She died fighting for her people's freedom. I buried her with my own hands, swore I would never let the galaxy steal my soul the way it tried to steal hers." Rena felt the air shift inside her chest. So that was it, the reason he had leapt into the arena, the reason he had defied a prince. Not for her, but for a memory. "And I remind you of her," she said softly. "Yes," he admitted, turning back to face her, his eyes locked onto hers with unflinching honesty. "But that is not why I saved you." Her pulse quickened. His voice carried no falsehood, no hidden angle. It was raw, stripped bare. Then why, she demanded, needing to hear it. "Because she taught me that standing by while others suffer makes us complicit in their pain," Thorne said. "I saved you because it was right, not because I wanted anything from you." The words struck her harder than she expected. Her entire life, every interaction had been transactional: men wanting her body, nobles wanting her influence, slavers wanting her obedience. No one had ever wanted nothing. The very concept was alien. Her throat tightened. She masked it with a scoff. "And what do you expect me to do now? Be your grateful shadow. Follow you into battle like a trophy." Thorne's laugh was low, without humor. "If I wanted a slave, I would have chosen an easier way than defying a prince in his own arena." For the first time since they'd met, Rena smiled a real smile, small but genuine. "Perhaps there is hope for you yet, warrior." Before he could answer, a soft hum drew their attention. Thorne's hand went instantly to his sword. A small drone hovered outside the cracked window, its lens glowing as it recorded their every move. "Damn," Thorne muttered, slashing his blade in a swift arc. The drone shattered sparks raining against the floor. Rena's composure faltered. That was no ordinary machine. "Corino is watching." Thorne nodded grimly. "Then we've little time. He won't forgive what happened in the arena." Rena crossed her arms, her violet skin catching the lantern light. "You've made yourself a target, Thorne, and by extension me." "I've been a target my whole life," he said with a shrug. "One more enemy won't change that." Her eyes narrowed. "You speak as if death has no weight." "It has weight," he corrected, his gaze hard. "But I carry it so others don't have to." For the first time, Irina fell silent, studying him not as a rescuer or a threat, but as something else, a man carved from scars and choices, carrying burdens that mirrored her own. Outside, the city pulsed with unrest. Inside, two fractured lives stood on the edge of something neither dared name. Sparks had ignited, fragile, dangerous, and undeniable. Neither noticed the faint red light still glowing in the corner, a backup recorder transmitting to Corino's private chambers. The prince's eyes narrowed as he watched the feed, his fingers tracing the scar along his neck. His lips curled in a thin smile. "Play your game, barbarian. But in the end, everything has a price." The city was restless factions stirring in the streets, whispers spreading of the warrior who had defied a prince. And in the quiet of the safe house, beneath the weight of memory and scars, Thorne and Rena had begun to see each other not as legend and slave, but as something dangerously human. The past still haunted them, but in the shadows of that past, sparks had been struck. Sparks that, if fanned by fate, might one day become fire. The days that followed passed in a haze of shadows and whispers. Zaros was restless. The city's underworld alive with rumor. A warrior had defied Prince Corino, claimed a Zen prisoner, and walked out of the arena alive. Merchants muttered it in back alleys. Drunken nobles toasted it in smoky dens. Street gangs painted crude murals of a violet-skinned woman standing beside a swordsman with eyes like fire. Legends spread faster than the plasma currents. and with every tale, the prince's fury grew. Inside the safe house, the air was heavy with tension. Thorne had taken to his rituals, cleaning his weapons, sharpening his sword, scanning intel across battered data slates. Rena had watched him in silence at first, but her curiosity soon demanded answers. "What is Corino planning?" she asked one evening, her voice low but insistent. Thorne looked up, his gaze narrowing. "You really want to know?" "I need to know," she corrected. "My people's survival may depend on it." Thorne's jaw tightened. He slid one of the slates across the table. Its screen flickered, revealing stolen surveillance feeds and intercepted communications. Rena leaned closer, her breath catching, as she read the words, Project Purification. Her eyes widened. "He wouldn't dare." "He would," Thorne interrupted flatly. "And he will." The files described a virus engineered with surgical precision, designed not to spread randomly, but to seek out and unravel Zin DNA strand by strand. It was presented as a medical breakthrough, a cure for what Corino's propaganda called the Zin curse. But beneath the language of science lay the naked truth: genocide dressed in the garb of progress. Rena's hands trembled as she scrolled through diagrams, notes, and lists of test subjects. Faces she recognized flickered on the screen. Diplomats, healers, rebels, all dead. "They're building a death factory," she whispered, her voice hollow, "and the galaxy will cheer them for it." Thorne's expression was carved from stone. "Not if we stop him." Rena's gaze snapped to his. You speak as if you intend to fight a prince's entire army alone." Thorne allowed the faintest trace of a smile. "I've done worse." She shook her head, rising to her feet. "No, if we are to stop this, I cannot remain a chained diplomat or a trembling slave. I must become something else." Her words hung between them. Then she added softly, "Teach me." The next morning, the safe house echoed with the ring of steel. Thorne stood across from her in the training chamber, his stance steady, his practice blade poised. Rena gripped her own weapon awkwardly, the wooden shaft unfamiliar in her hands. Sweat dampened her violet skin as she tried to mimic his movements. "Too stiff," he said, stepping forward. His hands closed over hers, adjusting her grip. The heat of his touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with her Zen biology. "Let your body learn the rhythm. Don't think, feel." She smirked faintly. "That's usually my line." He stepped back, watching as she tried again. This time her strike flowed more naturally, her hips aligning with the motion. The blade whistled through the air, missing its mark, but striking with more control. "Better," Thorne said. Rena arched a brow. High praise from the infamous slayer. His lips twitched. "Don't let it go to your head." They trained until sweat dripped from their brows, until her arms trembled from strain, and his patience was tested by her relentless questions. But as the hours passed, something shifted. She was no longer the prisoner he had claimed. She was a partner, learning the dance of blades, matching his rhythm, stroke for stroke. During a break, she collapsed onto the floor, laughing breathlessly. "If the prince doesn't kill me, your training will." Thorne sat beside her, his sword across his knees. "Survival demands strength. You asked for this." She admitted, her laughter fading into something softer. Her eyes found his bright and calculating, but also filled with a flicker of something more vulnerable. "And for the first time in years, I feel alive." Their gazes lingered, the space between them shrinking. Then, almost without thought, she leaned closer. Their lips brushed a fleeting kiss, tentative, filled with the uncertainty of two souls carrying too much pain. When they parted, Rena's smile carried a trace of her old defiance. "Not bad for a pleasure slave, hmm?" Thorne's reply was a rare, genuine smile. "Not bad at all." The moment was shattered by an explosion. The walls rattled, dust cascading from the ceiling as alarms wailed. Rena scrambled to her feet, grabbing her practice blade, while Thorne already had his real sword in hand. "They found us," he growled. The door burst inward. Elite guards in Corino's crimson livery stormed inside, their weapons, a forbidden blend of plasma and steel. Energy bolts seared through the air, scorching the walls. "Stay behind me," Thorne shouted, intercepting the first attacker with a brutal counterstrike. His blade flashed, severing tendons, finding weak points in armor. But Rena did not stay behind. With a cry, she darted forward, her practice blade finding an exposed gap in a guard's defenses. The man staggered, shocked, before Thorne finished him with a swift stroke. "Not bad," Thorne muttered. Stop underestimating me, she snapped, her violet eyes blazing. They fought back to back, the rhythm they had forged in training now tested by blood. Thorne moved with lethal grace, his blade a storm of death. Rena moved differently, less refined but unpredictable, her diplomat's mind turning observation into improvisation. When cornered, she reached for her Zen gift, a single touch, sending enemies collapsing in ecstasy that dulled into unconsciousness. The room became a battlefield of fire and steel. Bodies fell, sparks flew, blood splattered across stone. In the chaos, memories flickered. For Thorne, flames devouring his childhood home. Alacrus soldiers dragging his family away, the weight of his father's sword in hands too small to wield it. Rage had carried him ever since each battle, a futile attempt to silence the screams in his memory. For Rena, council chambers filled with sneering diplomats, the condescension of men who saw her not as an equal, but as a commodity. The first time one of them reached for her, whispering, "Perhaps we could negotiate privately." The humiliation, the fury, the slow erosion of hope. Now side by side, their pain fused into purpose. The last attacker, a brute with cybernetic arms, charged. Thorne raised his blade, but Rena was faster. She darted forward, her hand brushing the man's exposed flesh. His roar choked into a gasp as his body collapsed, undone by her touch. She withdrew her hand, trembling. "A gift becomes a curse when others fear it," she murmured. Thorne's voice was steady, "Not when you choose how to wield it." Silence descended, at last broken only by their ragged breathing. The safe house was a ruin, bodies strewn across the floor, smoke curling from shattered walls. Thorne knelt, searching the corpses. He found insignias, royal seals, gang tattoos, hired blades, mercenary zealots, all sent to test them. Rhina pressed a hand to a shallow cut on her arm, her eyes haunted. "He won't stop. You've humiliated him in front of his people. He'll make sure we pay the price." Thorne rose his blade, dripping red. "Then let him come. I've been running from shadows long enough." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time felt the weight of his legend. He was not just the slayer. He was a man who had chosen to fight when he could have walked away. "Why did you really save me?" she asked again, her voice almost a whisper. Thorne's answer was silence, but in his eyes she saw it. Not desire, not pity, but recognition. He turned toward the shattered doorway. "We need to move. There's a safe contact in the lower districts. We'll plan our next strike from there." Rena followed her steps, unsteady but resolute. She no longer walked as a prisoner or a diplomat. She walked as something new, something forged in fire and blood. Outside, Zaros trembled on the edge of chaos. Inside, two souls carried scars and burdens, but also the first fragile threads of trust. Neither spoke it aloud, but both knew their fight was no longer just for survival. It was for something greater. And Corino had just declared war. The palace of Zaros glowed like a jewel in the night, its spires ablaze with crystalline lights that shimmered across the city's skyline. Streets thrummed with celebration, banners rippled from balconies, nobles poured vintage earth wines into golden chalices, and orchestras filled the courtyards with triumphant notes. It was Prince Corino's 25th birthday, and the entire city had been summoned to rejoice in his ascension as the unchallenged heir of Zaros. But beneath the fireworks and laughter, shadows stirred. Whispers of rebellion threaded through the lower districts. In the taverns, men still spoke of the barbarian who had defied the prince in his own arena. And in the back streets, rumors of something darker spread, a project whispered only as Purification. From a concealed vantage high on the palace's outer wall, Thorne and Rena watched the revelry unfold. Disguised in stolen uniforms, they looked like nothing more than guards on rotation, yet every sense was sharpened. The mission was simple in words, deadly in practice: infiltrate the palace, uncover the truth of Project Purification, and stop it before midnight. Rena adjusted the holographic mask, flickering over her features, disguising her violet skin with the illusion of pale flesh. She hated the feel of it, the denial of who she was, but necessity left no room for pride. "I could still pass as a servant," she whispered, her voice low against the night air. "No one questions a Zin at royal gatherings." Thorne's reply was sharp. "No, we go in together as equals." Her eyes flickered to him, surprised at the steel in his tone. Then slowly she inclined her head. "Very well, as equals." The grand hall glittered with wealth. Chandeliers of hovering crystal bathed the marble floor in golden light, while courtiers in silks and polished armor mingled with alien dignitaries. At the far end upon a dais of silver, Prince Corino stood resplendent in ceremonial robes, his expression lit by an unholy zeal. "My friends," he declared, raising a crystal glass, "tonight we celebrate not just my birth, but the dawn of a new era, an era free from corruption, from the poison that has plagued our people for centuries." The crowd roared approval. Thorne's jaw tightened. Rena's hands curled into fists beneath her disguise. As Corino basked in the applause, an elderly advisor approached the dais, carrying a small metallic sphere. He bowed deeply. "Your Highness has instructed the final gift from your mother, sealed to be opened on this day." Corino's eyes softened, if only for a heartbeat. He took the sphere reverently. With a press of his finger, it unfolded, projecting a shimmering hologram. The form of a regal woman appeared, her face composed, but her eyes glistening with tears. "My beloved son," the hologram began. "If you see this, it means you are 25. There is something you must know, something I carried in silence to protect you." The hall fell silent, every guest leaning forward. "You are not my son by blood," Image continued, her voice breaking. "Your true mother was a Zen woman, one of your father's many affairs. I could not bear children of my own, but I chose to raise you as mine. I loved you as fiercely as if you were of my flesh. But you must understand, hatred will not heal what love can." The words detonated through the chamber. Gasps echoed. Wine spilled across marble. Nobles exchanged horrified glances. Corino staggered back, his face ashen. "No, lies, all lies." But under the harsh light of the chandeliers, a truth emerged. A faint undertone shimmered across his skin, a subtle violet hue, almost invisible, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Rena's breath caught. "He's one of us," she whispered. Thorne's eyes hardened, all his hatred self-hatred. Corino's hands shook as he stared at his own flesh, as though seeing it for the first time. "No, oh, I am not one of them. I am pure. I am my mother's son." The hologram wept, her voice breaking. "I loved you, my dearest boy. Not for what blood you carried, but for who you were. Do not let my silence become your destruction." Corino's composure cracked. His lips peeled back in a snarl as he drew a control device from his robes. "I will prove it. I will launch Project Purification now. If I were truly one of them, it would kill me too." The hall erupted in chaos. Nobles screamed, some rushing for exits, others frozen in shock. Guards surged forward, but Thorne was already moving. Shedding his disguise, he vaulted onto the dais, his sword flashing in the golden light. "Stop this madness," he roared. Corino's eyes blazed, his face twisted with fury and despair. "I will cleanse the galaxy. I will cleanse myself." The control device trembled in his grasp, his finger hovering over the activation key. Rena tore free of her disguise, her violet skin glowing under the lights. She rushed toward the chamber, holding the Zen hostages, shouting, "Look at yourself, Corino. You would destroy your own kind." "I am not one of you," he screamed, slamming a secondary control. A shimmering barrier crackled to life, sealing him off from Thorne's reach. "You are exactly what you fear," Thorne shouted through the field. "But it isn't your blood that made you this way. It's your choices." The hologram flickered again, the mother's voice pleading, "My son, listen to me. Love transcends race biology. Everything we think defines us. I chose to love you regardless of your birth. Please choose differently." For a heartbeat, Corino's rage faltered. His eyes darted to the reflection in the barrier's surface, seeing at last the faint violet undertones of his skin, the scar on his neck, not from a Zen attack but self-inflicted when he had first discovered the truth. "How many?" he whispered. "How many of my kind have I killed? Because I couldn't face what I was." The control slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Hope flickered in Rena's eyes. But then Corino's face twisted into a terrible broken smile. "Too many. Far too many. I cannot live as what I have hated." Before anyone could stop him, he drew a ceremonial dagger from his belt. With one swift motion, he plunged it into his own chest. "No," Rena cried, slamming her palms against the barrier. But the field dissolved only as his body crumpled to the floor, blood spreading across marble. His last words were barely audible. "I'm sorry." The hall plunged into chaos. Nobles screamed. Guards faltered. Thorne caught Rena as she stumbled, her body trembling with shock. "He's gone," Thorne said quietly. Rena's eyes glistened, her voice hollow. He was never free, not from them, not from himself. Thorne looked down at the lifeless prince, the dagger still clutched in his hand. Hatred consumed him. But it won't consume us. Even as the hall descended into panic, Thorne and Rena moved with purpose. They secured the fallen control device, freed the hostages, and silenced the chaos with the authority of those who had faced death and lived. By the time the night was over, Corino was dead, the project halted, and Zaros stood at a crossroads. A prince's hatred had died with him, but the vacuum he left threatened to swallow the city whole. Thorne and Rena exchanged a glance amid the ruin, their bond forged and fire their path only beginning. The dawn after Corino's death came slowly, as though the sun itself hesitated to shine upon a city so recently drenched in blood. Zaros stirred restlessly beneath a sky of purple haze and fractured light, its towers casting long shadows across the streets below. The nobles whispered of betrayal. The common folk whispered of change. And in every corner, the same question lingered. Who will lead us now? Inside the palace, chaos had given way to fragile order. Thorne stood in the throne room, his sword still sheathed, but his presence radiating authority. Guards who had once bent knee to Corino now looked to him, uncertain but willing. Across the chamber, Rena addressed the council, her voice calm, measured, and resonant, every word cutting through the fear like a blade. "What the people need is not another tyrant," she declared, her violet skin glowing under the morning light that streamed through the broken windows. "They need balance. They need a bridge between worlds." Thorne moved to her side, his scarred form a stark counterpoint to her elegance. Strength and diplomacy, warrior and diplomat, human and Zen. "We stand together." The council erupted in murmurs, some protesting, some nodding. Yet the tide of opinion was already shifting. The story of the arena had spread: the barbarian who had leapt into the sands, the Zen who had stood unbroken in chains. Their defiance had become legend before Corino's body was even cold. By week's end, the council announced it formally. Thorne and Rena would serve as co-rulers, guardians of Zaros, and symbols of a fragile new era. Their first acts as leaders struck at the heart of Corino's legacy. The infamous arena was transformed. No longer would it be a stage for executions and blood spectacles. Under Thorne's command, it became a training ground where warriors of every race could hone their skills, not in cruelty, but in mutual respect. Combat trials remained, but their purpose shifted, not to humiliate, but to test character, courage, and honor. Project Purification was dismantled, its research facilities stripped of their horrors. Yet not all was destroyed. Under Resena's guidance, the genetic science was repurposed. What had once been designed to erase a people was transformed into medicine capable of curing diseases across species. Death became life. Hatred became healing. The 12 Zen women rescued from the palace's lower chambers became the first members of a new diplomatic corps. Trained in both combat and negotiation, they were symbols of resilience, tasked with building bridges where once there had only been chains. For the first time in generations, Zen voices spoke in council halls without being silenced. And through it all, Thorne and Rena's bond deepened. In public, they stood side by side, a unity of steel and grace. In private, they shed their titles, becoming simply man and woman, scar and song warrior and healer. One evening, as twilight bathed the palace gardens in shades of gold and violet, Rena stood watching a group of children, orphans both human and Zen, playing among the newly planted flowers. They chased each other across the grass, their laughter a melody that had been absent from Zaros for too long. "They don't see the differences," Rena whispered. "They just see family." Thorne came to stand beside her, his broad hand resting gently on her shoulder. "They see truth, the kind Corino could never face." She turned to him, her eyes luminous. "And what truth is that?" "That love isn't about what we are," he said, echoing words from long ago. "It's about who we choose to be." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "You sound like a diplomat again." He smirked faintly. "And you sound like a warrior." Their laughter mingled with the children's light and unburdened. For a brief, precious moment, the weight of crowns and legacies lifted, leaving only two souls who had chosen each other against all odds. Their coronation was unlike any Zaros had seen before. Thorne wore ceremonial armor that blended human military precision with Zen artistry steel, etched with flowing patterns of violet light, symbolizing strength tempered by empathy. Rena's gown shimmered in hues of royal purple, woven with metallic threads from earth, embodying both her heritage and her future. As they stood before the gathered masses, the council proclaimed them sovereigns not of domination, but of unity. "I never thought I would see this day," Rena whispered as the crowd roared their names. "A Zen Queen," Thorne replied softly, his hand brushing hers, "and a human king who finally understands that true strength comes from love, not hate." Their first decree outlawed the enslavement of any species within Zaros' reach. Their second established equal representation for Zen and human alike in governance. Their third repurposed the wealth once spent on blood sport into education, medicine, and rebuilding. It was not perfection. Tension simmered. Old prejudices did not vanish overnight. But for the first time, a foundation for something better had been laid. Years passed, legends grew. Travelers spoke of Zaros, once a city of cruelty, now a beacon of strange unity. The warrior king who had never run from a fight, and the Zen queen whose wisdom matched her beauty. Together, they became more than rulers. They became myth. In the evenings, Thorne often found Rena in the palace gardens, teaching their adopted children, orphans of war and slavery, the ways of both sword and diplomacy. Some practiced combat drills, others debated with words sharper than blades. And in every lesson, the same truth was instilled, that love was stronger than fear, that unity was greater than division. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Rena traced the scars on Thorne's chest, her touch gentle. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Saving me that day in the arena." "Never," Thorne said, pulling her closer. "Though I regret not saving Corino from himself." She rested her forehead against his. "We can't save everyone, but we can build something better from the ashes." He kissed her softly. "Then let that be our legacy." The palace towers gleamed in the twilight, no longer monuments to tyranny, but symbols of renewal. In the distance, the ships arrived from across the galaxy, diplomats, warriors, scholars, all seeking to learn from what Zaros had become. Thorne and Rena stood upon their balcony, the city sprawling below them, alive with possibility. Stars shimmered above, silent witnesses to their journey. "Ready for tomorrow's challenges?" Rena asked, her eyes sparkling with the same fire that had first defied the arena. Thorne's answer was a kiss, gentle yet filled with promise. Always. For tonight they were not rulers, not warrior and slave, not human and Zen. They were simply Thorne and Rena, two souls who had chosen love over hate, who had defied fate and reshaped the galaxy by refusing to yield. And as the stars burned bright, their legacy echoed that true power lay not in conquest nor in purity, but in the courage to embrace difference, to heal wounds, and to choose a better path. The galaxy would remember them not for the wars they fought, but for the future they forged together. The end.